And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Exceptional Experience podcast, featuring myself, Billy Pickens, and my good friend Maya Warren. Maya, how are you doing today?
Hey Billy, I'm doing good. I know it's been a while, but I'm hanging in
It
there.
has been a while. You had a lot of things going on, a lot of personal stuff, but it's really great. I was just telling my mom because, we had to go up to New York to help some families, so we just got back and I have my special chair that I sit in to do the podcast, and I was telling my mom, it's the first time I've sat in this chair ever in a long time. It just feels really good to be back and be able to discuss things with you all. And Maya and I were just talking off air about purpose and helping people, and so it's really so amazing to really do this podcast, continue to do it. And I'm just grateful to ECAC and all the great people there, for supporting us in that. So, speaking of support and speaking of people being behind you, today's topic is going to be about building and maintaining friendships. And it's just something that I thought of because, I had a last minute thing where I had to do a temporary move for a bit, and wasn't able to catch up with some friends, but uh, coming back just now, catching up with everybody, it just feels really good to be around friends. And so we're going to talk about that today. And so, I was always raised to have ladies go first. So, Maya, what has your experience been like in terms of building and maintaining your friendships? Whether it be growing up and being now, and what has that been like for you?
Yeah, so my experience with being a friend, I'll start there. Of course, that's been something that's always been a thing for me. I think just having an awareness of people who were either outcasts or sat alone at the lunch table. Like I've always been drawn to those specific type of people, or people who were just different, for whatever reason. Um, and so I very early on had almost an awareness of people who needed a friend. Um, but then being in friendships where I was doing more of the pouring into versus being poured into.
Mhm.
Um, and so I've been on that end of things. But in the last few years, it's been a blessing as I've gotten to experience friendship on a deeper level. And for most people who don't know, most of my friends are decades older than me. It's always been the case. I'm 26, and most of my friends aren't even in my age bracket. But that, I think, a lot of that has to do with my upbringing. Like I was, in Black culture, we're raised around, for the most part, multiple generations. Like, so I was raised
Yeah.
by my grandmother, who was, qualifies as like baby boomer. Then, coming up with my parents until I got adopted, like, they were Gen X relatively. So, like, um, I've always had an affinity for this, like, intergenerational dynamics. And I used to
Hmm.
kind of begrudge that, right? Because most people see me and they're like, "Oh, you're so mature for your age," and that doesn't always feel like a blessing,
Yeah.
especially when you
Yeah.
consider friendships. And you've had to mature a lot quicker than most people in your age group, so it doesn't always feel like a compliment. Um, though it is a compliment, I take it as a compliment now. But when you struggle with finding people who are like-minded just from a maturity perspective in your own age group, it can hurt a little bit because you're like, well, I don't mind being mature, but I also want to connect with people my
Fit
own
in.
age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so friendships for me have been an interesting thing in that I've just learned to embrace um, the level of wisdom that God has given me.
Yeah.
Um, and continues to supply me by his grace. But also like learning to embrace um like the people that come in and out of my life, right? Because some people are, you maintain a certain level of relationship for decades or a long period of time. Like I've known Billy for over 10 years. I've known several
Hmm.
other people over 10 years, but then I have people who I've met a couple years ago and we feel like we've known each other for 10 years. So there's that dynamic. And then there's also the dynamic of when new people come into your life, what does that look like? Like, how do you build a relationship? And for me, the first aspect of that that I've been learning, especially as a young adult, is just being vulnerable, like bringing your full
Yeah.
self, right? As you allow yourself to be known by the people around you, um, it can feel vulnerable because it's up to them to choose to be a friend or acquaintance, or
Yeah.
someone you work with, or be more than that in terms of a best friend or a deeper friend, someone you spend a lot of time with outside of your commonality of setting, like a workplace or school. So we have a tendency to hide ourselves, like the things that we like to do, the people that we like to be around, maybe our
Yeah.
laugh, the interest that we have. We tend to hide those things because we don't want to scare people away. But what we're
Yeah.
really doing is doing a disservice to us because we're not being honest about who we are. And it's from that honesty that you can begin to build genuine friendships, because the people who are meant to stay will stay regardless of how much they know about you. But the people
Right.
who can't handle it or weren't meant to handle being a friend to you, it's okay that they leave, because that's less time you have to figure out how to navigate some of the wounds that that potential relationship could have inflicted, in either aspect. So, like, I think the first step in building relationships is just like being comfortable with who you are. Like, I
Yes.
have the
Yes.
moniker of Built Different, my program / initiative, and it's and the tagline is uniquely created on purpose. And one of the reasons we avoid friendships is because we're not okay with ourselves, right?
Hmm.
I've seen even adults in their 30s and 40s avoid people because they don't know necessarily how to be themselves around other people, and they feel like they're either too much or too little. Um, but you can't read other people's mind, you can't anticipate how that you're perceived, and we don't like that. We like to have control as humans, or at least the illusion of it, right?
Yes.
But in reality, like, the people that um are designed to appreciate who you are, there are people out there. But if you keep
Right.
hiding yourself, you'll never find them, and they'll never find you.
No, I couldn't agree more. Mic drop. Couldn't agree more with everything you said there. And I can definitely relate to the part that you said about, being mature for your age, and that kind of being, mixed blessing. On the one hand, yeah, you're glad to hear people that you are mature for your age, but at the same time, growing up, I think as a society, we're taught to make friends. I mean, and it's a human condition. You should want to meet people and get out there. But I think sometimes we put too much pressure on people, uh, in a sense that, oh, you have all these friends, you're gonna have higher status, and you're gonna get, you know, I use an example, and it kind of sounds, a bit shallow in a way, but I remember I was convinced when I went to prom in high school that I was gonna win prom king, and I didn't. I was kind of sad about that, and I was like, oh, I don't have enough friends, or I'm not involved in enough clubs. And over time, obviously, I got older and I realized, really wasn't all that. But I think that people normally will seek validation and want to reach a social hierarchy without always realizing that it's okay to have three friends that really mean a lot to you, and building and maintaining those relationships instead of feeling like you have to be this extroverted person that's always, constantly making friends and
Yeah.
always
And to
out
your
there.
point, sorry, and to your point, Billy, about that, like, I think what we don't talk about enough is that there's varying levels of depth within various friendships, right?
Yeah.
Um, like, there are some friends that I can call, and we can just talk about how they're doing, how I'm doing, and that's it. There are some friends that I have, like, we actually go do things together, to do
Yes.
things together, right? And there are some people in our lives that we just end up being friends too, and they're not necessarily friends to us, but we're friends to them. We're friendly. We show care. We show concern, empathy, and we act on that, and that's okay too. And I think that takes the pressure off of us, because we don't. They don't always have to be like the same thing, right? There's different
Yes.
ways that you connect and relate to people. And even for me, and I'm sure you can attest, like, I'm more introverted on
Yeah.
terms of,
You and I both, honestly.
yeah. So I recharge by being by myself and thinking and creating, and I love that. But I also have a deep need for people. We all do. That's how we
Yes.
were created. And so around September of last year, um, my like from my adoptive family, like my sister was like, "Hey, I see this opportunity. There's a local church up the street. They're doing a young adult night, young adult group thing." And I was like, my introversion was like, I'm comfortable at home.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is gonna go. Because it's new people. Will I fit? Like, in terms of like the overall group dynamic.
Yeah.
And so I just went kind of like stepped out on faith and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go. It doesn't have to be comfortable for me to do it. Like I can do something
Yeah.
out of discomfort and then it end up, being beneficial. And so I go and I've been going ever since. And it's almost been 6 months. And to see
Right.
like I've made friends outside of that. So there's a couple of people that we hang out outside of that time every Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how much, like, as someone who starts programs, as someone who leads in a lot of areas, who creates like spaces for other young people, I didn't realize how much I just needed that myself. Like to show
Yeah.
up in an environment that I didn't build or help create or initiate and just be present and
Yeah.
share my life and what I get to do with other young people. And most of these people are older than me in terms of young adult, but even then, like just to have an outlet, a place to go to break up the monotony of my
Yeah.
week, because I do spend a lot of time at home. It's not like I'm a hermit, but like my home is
Yeah.
where my
Yeah.
office is. My home is where I
Exactly.
create. And then not being able to drive, like I can't just up and leave. There's some planning involved in that. So
Yeah.
um, just branching out. And one thing I will say to other young people is it's okay. Like every situation you walk into is not going to be comfortable, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to want to do everything on your to-do list. But sometimes what's required of you is to embrace the discomfort and do the hard thing because on the other side of that, you'll see the benefits of making that decision, i.e., could be ended up making a friend. So if you're introverted and you're like, oh, I don't know if I how I'm responding in this social interaction, like I feel like I'm talking too much or I'm talking too little, like instead of allowing those thoughts to take you over, just like take a deep breath and recognize, you know what? I am doing my best in this moment to be present. That is a
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
And if you're talking too much, people will tell you either in their
Oh
body
yeah.
language or verbally. If you're talking too
Yeah.
little, people will try to engage a little bit more. But you can't control how other people respond. So showing up is the first part, doing the hard thing, embracing the discomfort. And the more you do that, it's like working out. When you work out, your muscles are actually developing tears as they grow, as they get
Yeah.
stronger. So, in order to get stronger, your muscles are actually being injured during the process of physical activity. But in the end, it actually works out because it strengthens the relationship between your bones, your joints, your ligaments, your
Yeah.
tendons, your nerves, your brain, all those things. It ends up working out for you in the long run because you build up this endurance that helps you navigate everyday life, right? And then for
Yeah.
those who aren't able to be as physically active because of their disability or condition, it's similar to learning, right?
Yeah.
Nobody learns anything by just focusing on the knowledge that they've already attained. So what was easy for you in second grade, that's great, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in order to go from second grade to third grade knowledge, you have to be challenged with new information. And if you stay comfortable, you will never be challenged and you won't grow. So that's what I would
Right.
just.
No, I completely agree. And to your point, I feel like everybody has a tribe. You talked about your community group. I've had many community groups and church groups that I've been a part of that were very helpful. And it goes back to what you said about being vulnerable. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people might have some difficulty with, and myself included. Like I I've gotten to the point where I'm okay with it now, and I've embraced it. But since high school, I somewhat struggled with social anxiety, where depending on certain settings, I was good with people I knew, and I was good in terms of meeting people and congregating, but I was never really a fan of loud settings all the time. But I did want to go out and meet people and whatnot. But and at first I was like, oh, something's weird because that condition to make you feel really alone, to make you feel like no one understands you, no one gets it. But the more I was open about that, the more I found people that also navigated that in their own life, and where I was able to make friends because of that. So I really believe what you said about vulnerability is really important, and being vulnerable and being okay. And sometimes I went to the doctor, and I'm not a big on like segregating yourself or only making friends that are like this. But one thing that did kind of help me was uh, finding friends who really understood me. And I was talking to my doctor about that. She was saying, because I was saying this was during the pandemic, and I was saying how much I was struggling with, finding certain groups of friends. And she said, well, why don't you find friends that are also blind or also low vision or have disabilities? And I said, yeah, I have a couple of friends like that. Um, but I chose to start leaning into those friendships, and it really created something um, special, something deeper, and really understanding a real understanding that maybe we hadn't had before, and
Mhm.
also relatability. Um, and so I think that that was really important, and I think that also meeting people halfway and understanding that. I think one of the things that I've been blessed with, one of the gifts that I have, is my relatability, not just in my own life, but my understanding and empathy for others. So even if I don't understand what you go through exactly, I may not know exactly what you went through. I have friends from all different kinds of walks of life. I have friends, that work 9 to 5s. I have friends that are barely making it right now. So and I think that's one of the things but one of the mixed blessing parts of that is I myself sometimes struggle to fit in with any particular group. But I've come to use that to my advantage, to where yes, I have my core group that I really relate to and really understand, but I'm also opening myself up to meeting people from different walks of life and having empathy for them. And that doesn't mean that we have to talk every day. It doesn't mean we have to uh, even talk regularly, but I think I have a connection with them just on a human level, and knowing that, hey, this is my fellow man, my fellow woman, and I may not always agree with everything they do. I may not always understand it, but I appreciate their company and I appreciate their friendship. And it doesn't mean that you allow toxicity or anything like that into your life, but it means that you open yourself up to what you may not have before. Like you said, going to that community group, you were kind of hesitant, and I can definitely relate to that. I mean, there are a lot of things that my mom and my family have said, hey, you should go to this. And for a while, I was kind of, I don't really want to do nothing, but I am trying to evolve from that mindset. And sure, if it's something I'm genuinely not into, that's one thing. But if I even feel like there's a possibility I might be into it, I might give it a shot. And then there's always a chance I don't like it and I don't have to go again. But at least it's a great way to open myself up to new opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had before.
Yeah, and on that note, like one of my things has been, so for a while with sensory overstimulation, which is something I navigate. Um, it was hard for me not to be able to go to basketball games or events with a lot of people because even though I'm introverted, I still like basketball. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy playing it. Um, and a couple years ago, I went to my first concert, and then I just kind of fell in love with going to concerts. So there are things that as you branch out and just try new things, you figure out that there are exceptions to the rule for you, and on your point about friendships, and I don't want to make it seem easy, right? Because it's not, right?
Yeah.
If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing.
Yeah.
So
Very true.
for me, one of the things that's been helpful is taking each situation in stride. So I had uh, this same community group at this local church, fellow young adults. Um, so I spent the afternoon with one of the friends I've made there. So we hung out. We went to like Moe's. And I'm in a phase of my life where I don't calculate potential asks related to my accommodations as much as I used to. So there are
Hmm.
times now where I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to ask for sighted guide. Forgot to think about that. And so we pull up to Bose, and I'm like, I've only been here one other time. I think I'm gonna need a sighted guide. So I was like, hey, Ashley, do you mind if I use your arm? And then I gave her a quick tutorial on how to decide a
Yeah.
guide. But like, there was a period of time where that would have been something I would have shuddered to even think that I would ask for, or let
Yeah,
alone.
it's tough.
And like, it's a blessing because, like, you know, in that moment, it felt like such a big thing to ask for that, but I asked anyway.
Yes.
And that's the thing. And she gave me sighted guide, and then that evening we went to the young adult group. And after the event was over, she wanted to go a different way than I was used to, back to the parking lot. And so immediately I felt real anxious because,
Um,
I've spent almost 6 months, going and coming from one direction. So I've memorized this path. I got it. Now you want to switch it up. So now I have to be adaptable on the fly. And so I started freaking out, and I guess she could tell a little bit because, my internal freak out moments are
yeah.
way more intense than how it's expressed outwardly. Like, I might
Yeah.
look very calm, cool, and collected on the outside, but I am
Yeah.
on the
It'd be like
inside.
that.
So immediately I was like, hey, is it well lit? I'm trying to ask questions. And she's like, oh, I can help you navigate it if you need me to. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to need that. So it ended up being another girl with us that I've also made friends with. And she ended up, hey, I can give you sighted guide. She just up and volunteered. And so she gives me sighted guide through this corridor, and we make it to the parking lot. And I didn't trip on anything. I didn't fall. I made it. I survived because I'm here.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, I don't have a lot of moments where I'm like, wow, Maya, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
you That was a good choice you made to, like, not let your pride get in the way of you receiving help from someone, especially someone who's very enthusiastic about giving it. Um,
Mhm.
but it also highlighted another thing. Like, this happened a couple of weeks ago, right? And I told you I've been going to this meeting for like 6 months. Over the course of those 6 months, I've shared, as we've done devotionals, what it's like to live with disabilities, what
Yes.
it's like to be Black, what it's like to be a music artist. Like, there's not very many details that I felt layered to share that I have withheld. Like, there isn't any detail that I've withheld as appropriately, related to the topics at hand. And through that, even though there were times where it was uncomfortable because you don't know how it's gonna land on people, like, I still share it anyway. And
Yeah.
they're ending beautiful discussions, but you don't realize how much people are paying attention to what you say
Yes.
until a moment like that happens. Like, the fact that my other friend was like, hey, I can give you sighted guide. And I'm
Right.
racking my brain. I'm like, who taught her? Like, when did I mention? People are paying attention because I've mentioned being visually impaired. I'm sure they've seen me with my white cane when I've walked in there. Like, but you don't realize the impact of being vulnerable. Because had I withheld that information for 6 months, it would have been very shocking news
Yeah.
to them for me to need help all of a sudden. I'm sure they would have given it, but there wouldn't have been a foundation of knowledge there if I would have withheld who I really was and what I come with. And I think that's the task, right?
Yeah.
We've been taught that if it's not comfortable, we shouldn't do it. But most things in life that require growth require a level of work, tenacity, and discomfort at times. So, what I would say to parents who are navigating trying to organize play dates with their young ones, or trying to help their kids develop social skills, one thing I would say is it might be uncomfortable for you as the parent, right? Because you're
Yeah.
hoping that this opportunity will land better than the last one. It might be new to your child and they might not respond necessarily the way that you hope they would. But I promise that the more you keep trying, right? The more you keep providing opportunities and exposure, like, eventually the other side of that is some form of growth, right? Now, what that
Yeah.
looks like, we don't know. We would hope that it would end in relationships. But maybe in this case, the more you keep trying, you expose other parents and children to what it's like to have a child with a disability. And that's just as important because that expands their knowledge base their level to empathize, right? And that's
Yeah.
one more person that you've educated. It might be that maybe you develop a relationship with another parent who can relate to what you're navigating, even if your
Right.
kids don't mesh well. There's a lot of outcomes that can come from that. And so I would encourage parents to not be discouraged if the desired outcome doesn't happen, but always look for, like, okay, what did we gain from this situation? If it was a lesson in what not to do, what your child doesn't like, or what your child loves to do, who they like
Yeah.
being around, and even you as a parent, what situations cause you to respond with anxiety, and do your children take that demeanor on as well? So like, there's a lot of outcomes that come from trying to foster and build relationships. And then on the maintenance side, like, give yourself grace.
Yeah, of course.
And that's the parent as well as the child, right? Life is a
Yeah.
journey, and we don't arrive until we're 6 feet under. And so, like, it's a process. If you get it right some days, great. If you don't, you can regroup
Okay.
and keep it
Absolute
moving
best of us. Yeah,
forward.
and
Because you're not alone in that, right? We're all developing.
yeah, and to your point, I would say both to parents and young people listening to this, um, most people want to help. I know it may seem sometimes like a lot of people are against you or they have these microaggressions, but most people want to help. Like Maya was saying with her story, and that's something that I've happened to me sometimes where, I'll be out with friends and I may need certain accommodations, and I mean I always voice it because I don't want to, stand out or look funny. That's one thing I hear a lot from a lot of people with disabilities is that, oh well, I don't want to stand out. You know, I don't think if they're true friends and they love you for you, you won't stand out for that. They want
Yeah,
to help you. And so, and going back to what we said, I can't stress it enough. Vulnerability is the key. I mean, think about I have conspiracy theories to why things like TikTok have blown up so much over the past few years. I think a lot of it comes down to the vulnerability and the ability for somebody to just talk to their phone and talk to a camera, maybe without any makeup, maybe without, all these added, functions and things like that. And they're able to make it come across like, oh, I can do this too. I can share my story too. And it really opens up the door, for a lot of people to be willing to open up and share their stories about what they are experiencing, not just people with disabilities. I think we all can relate to loneliness and introversion and feeling like an outcast. And so, the more you come together and the more you say, "Hey, I'm navigating these things as well." You may not always be able to understand directly what they're dealing with, but I think most people say, "Hey, I get it. I can be of assistance." And so, um, just be open to that. And if they're not receptive of it, then that might be cause to question that friendship, or it may be a time to have a conversation to understand, so they understand what may come with that friendship, and hopefully you're pouring as much into them as they're pouring to you. So even though they're helping you physically or emotionally, whatever the case may be, like I try to be as equal and reach center with a lot of my friends in terms of, hey, if you're willing to help me with this, I'm willing to be support for you if you need to talk about something, or I'm willing to laugh with you. I'm willing to, go to that restaurant with you. So, um, I think people love the reciprocity of it all, regardless of what it may mean for them, what it may mean for you. Because yeah, nobody owes you anything, but the ability to be able to have the reciprocity and them having a good friend and you also having a good friend and maybe assistance in the process, I think is very fair for a lot of people.
yeah, yeah. And I'll just speak to one thing that you talked about is on the topic of standing out. And I'm gonna say my piece, and then you can close us out, Billy. But nobody um was meant to fit in or blend in. Like, we're all
Yeah.
uniquely created, right? So
Yes.
if you're unique, which everybody is in some way, shape, or form, then
Yeah.
it's inherent that you don't need to fit in because you are who you are, right?
Yeah.
So I would encourage everyone to evaluate from this perspective. Instead of trying to fit in,
Stand
see
up.
where you can fit in terms of contributing your uniqueness to the spaces that you're in, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of trying to change the shape of a puzzle piece that you are, see how your unique shape, the way that you were made, the way that you think, your gifts, your talents, your weaknesses, your strengths, see how those can contribute to the overall picture, right? Because we don't need two puzzle pieces that look the same, right? Because
Yeah.
if that was the case, then the puzzle's not going to work. But it's only when each unique piece is fit, finds its specific way to plug in, its specific position to kind of line up with the other unique puzzle pieces that you get the full picture. So that's what I would say, because I struggled with that a lot growing up, like
No,
trying
you
to
know that,
fit
bro.
in instead of embracing who I was uniquely and what that means to be in these spaces where maybe most people in the room can't relate to my disability, but they can relate to being a human. They can relate to being nervous. They can relate to enjoying Star Wars. You know, they
Yeah.
can relate to being an NBA basketball fan. They can relate to being someone who works well with their hands. They can relate to being a musician. So too many times we focus on the disability being a requirement for people to relate to us, but we miss out on the people who we could connect with if we focused on being comfortable with ourselves, bringing ourselves to our full selves to the table, and allowing people to see us for who we really are. All right, Billy. So on that note, I'll have you close us out.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. We hope that you enjoy the conversation, and also free to chime in the comments or wherever you're listening, or reach out to us. And uh, I cannot say thank you enough to ECAC, the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, for continuing to allow us to do this podcast, continue to support us in that. I can reach out to us on our website, and reach out to one of the parent educators, or whoever you may need. Maybe find a way to get in contact with us. And with that being said, thank you all for listening. Remember to glow and shine, and always uh, practice kindness and positivity. And from all of us here at ECAC, we will see you next time.